a warning?
There ain't nothing to worry about.
I'm worried that you work in an office, have children, celebrate wedding anniversaries. The world of heterosexual is a sick and boring life.
2 days ago, I saw a vehicle that had hauled that tanker. You want to get out of here? You talk to me.
Welcome back to the show, listeners.
Welcome back. Are you strapped in, Pete? Are you wearing your seatbelt?
Yeah, I've got some other straps. But this, I love this movie.
Yeah, this movie rocks.
I love everything we're going to be talking about today.
This movie kicks major ass.
Would you say that it is got it's high octane?
A high octane action movie, yes.
Absolutely. Well, listeners, you are in for it. I hope you're buckled in. My name's Pete.
And I'm Scott, and these are the movies that made us gay. Will Padilla, the host and creator of 1980s Now. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm a fan of a fan of your show and a huge fan of this particular movie.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
We're talking about such a fun movie. And you know, it's interesting because I didn't initially think we were going to get to this movie for a while, and then Furiosa came out this summer, and I'm just like, oh, fuck. We got to do The Road Warrior.
Yes.
We watched Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, directed by George Miller, written by Terry Hayes, Brian Hannett, and George Miller, produced by Byron Kennedy, released in Australia December 24th, 1981, and then had its American release May 22nd, 1982. The Road Warrior.
Yes, absolutely. Great movie.
Yeah.
Great movie. I mean, we often talk about our histories with this movie. Will, how far do you go back with The Road Warrior and Mad Max as a character? We can get into ours, but as our guest, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like most Americans, I didn't know it was a sequel. The first time I saw it was when it was branded to us as The Road Warrior, and my dad had this kind of shady friend, and they're talking about the early 1980s, who would every couple of weeks drop off like 8 or 10 Betamax cassette tapes with labels on them of different movies that I didn't know at the time, but it was obviously bootlegging from somewhere.
Right.
And we would go through them, and some my dad would wind up keeping if we loved them. And as soon as this one was available to be bootlegged, we had it. So sometime in the early 1980s was when I first saw it and immediately fell in love with this film.
Yeah. My first introduction to Mad Max was through Beyond Thunderdome.
Okay.
That came out in 85, so I was about 7 when that came out. So that was, for me, going to the theater. I saw it with my dad. We also had a Betamax player. My dad was an early adopter of that. Our Betamax player had a remote control with a cable that attached to the player. So,
What did you bootleg stuff on it?
my dad, no, my dad usually just went to the video store.
VCR.
My stepdad that's where we got into the whole like daisy chain 2 VCRs together or one VCR and the video camera to, kind of record one movie,
And did either your father or stepfather talk about how Betamax is the superior technology as compared to
Yes.
VHS? No.
My dad and my uncle were very much like, no, Betamax. It's like, it's clearer, it's cleaner, like the quality of it, all that. But then eventually it just kind of, it died out. So we had to bite the bullet and get a VHS. Get a VCR after a while, but we were there with the Betamax. But no, because I was a certain age, I think at 7, Thunderdome coming out in the theater, I went to see it with my dad.
Tina Turner.
Huge
deal. Yep.
Right. We don't need another hero. And so that was my introduction to it. And that one, I was just at 7. I liked it. I was compelled to it, but I also think that at that point, I had a reference for Mel Gibson. I think that Lethal Weapon might have come out already.
I think that's right. Yep.
And so I had this like, okay, this is an actor, and it seemed like it was dirty to like this town, you know, like I forget the name of the town, Bartertown,
yeah.
Bartertown. I was just like, oh, I would not want to live there. And this whole thing about like this society of children and Max, and he had like the long hair, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is wild. But then as like a teenager, I kind of get turned on to the fact that like, oh, there's these, you know, these first two movies. It's actually the third movie. There's these other two. I think the first one was always maybe a little bit harder to find, but the Road Warrior was the one that I kind of went to first. And then my friends and I fancied ourselves like movie buffs in like high school. And, you know, this is pre-internet, pre-IMDb and all that. And so there's this whole discussion of like the Road Warrior and like, is it called the Road Warrior? Is it called Mad Max 2? Like all that fun stuff. But I do remember initially seeing the Road Warrior, seeing Mad Max 2, and just being like, holy shit. Like Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
Like the difference in how he looks in the first two to by the time you get to Thunderdome.
I think that
Lethal Weapon and the big hair and all that.
Was Mel just shy of 21 when he made the first movie in 1979?
I think George Miller said he was just about 21 when he made the first one. Or when they shot it at least. And so, so teenage me, I'm seeing this going, oh, my God, I finally see what my mom sees in Mel Gibson. My mother loved.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a time where he was bulletproof for moms.
Yeah. Moms across America, right? And my mom was one of them. She loved Mel Gibson. I was always like, why? Like the big crazy hair, like, I don't know. But I see Thunderdome, and I'm like, or not Thunderdome, I see Road Warrior. I'm like, okay.
It was like he Benjamin buttoned in front of your eyes. You became sexier as you saw earlier films.
Sure.
Absolutely. And also as a kid, in 85 was Weird Science.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Weird Science is where we get Vernon Wells, and it's like, is he, you know, the Wes? Like, is it the same character? I'm assuming, you know. So I kind of have this other reference for this Vernon Wells character. And so when it kind of all of it falling into place, when I finally do see, you know, the Road Warrior, I was like, oh, okay. All right. I get it. And this movie is now my favorite.
So my background with the Road Warrior was this is definitely the type of movie that when I was going to see my dad, that this would be on a Sunday afternoon on TBS.
Yeah.
There was a time that I had definitely seen The Road Warrior. I don't know if I ever watched Mad Max, but it was one of those movies that I could never really see fully from beginning to end. It was always one of those films
cable.
that you just jump in on a television airing, probably on TBS, probably on the Superstation. I remember them cutting a lot of, like, whenever they were promoting all of the movies that were going to be on that month, for The Road Warrior, they always showed pretty much the first big line of dialogue of Mel. Probably that we're going to open up the show with, where he's talking to the gas town.
You want to get out of here? You talk to me.
Oh, sure.
Of that, he knows of the truck. So I remember that always being cut into all of the TV spots. And, yeah, I remember my dad really loving Mad Max. I think that my dad was probably a bigger fan of Beyond the Thunderdome. Just he was like a big Tina Turner fan.
I was going to say,
and he loved the song.
Yeah.
But I definitely remember television showings of The Road Warrior, and I feel like it wasn't until a few years ago that I properly sat down and watched this movie. It's just kind of one of those weird movies of your childhood. I was like that with Purple Rain, that I had never actually seen Purple Rain from start to finish, not edited for cable. And The Road Warrior was one of those movies. Right. And also, I mean, you just constantly saw this movie referenced when I was a kid, of that it's just so Mad Max. Like, it's almost like a descriptor for movies now.
It created its own aesthetic.
Created its own aesthetic and genre.
Yeah. Which I love the jump from Mad Max to Road Warrior as far as how the aesthetic goes, because when you do watch Mad Max, I don't know if you're not familiar with it.
You kind of think it's going to be the Road Warrior when you're watching it.
Right.
It's not quite what you think.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the first movie compared to?
Yeah, for me, Road Warrior is the best one, and it's. I guess it would have been an interesting experience to do what you did and see Thunderdome first, I think.
Yeah.
But it was kind of similar in a sense that seeing Road Warrior first, and then ultimately, ultimately, like you suggested, hunting down Mad Max, because I remember among my friends too, it was like a rumor almost, like this is the second movie we gotta. But when we finally watched it, quite honestly, I found it boring compared to having seen The Road Warrior. You know, it kind of felt small, and obviously it wasn't dystopian yet. I don't know. Everything that I loved about The Road Warrior was absent in a sense. Obviously, there's some similarities with regard to the action and the cars and that sort of thing. But I found it lacking, and it felt similarly about Thunderdome for different reasons, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's just so interesting that I guess it's just George Miller and just this mind that created all of this, to go from the look, the visual style, the storytelling style of Mad Max, of the first movie.
It's kind of him wanting to remake his own movie but make it better, too.
I can see that.
Of kind of like learning from his mistakes of characters and kind of how they shot that movie,
right.
Of like he wanted a second go at it.
Right.
And what's interesting about Mad Max, it grossed $90 million overseas, and it maybe got $9 million here. So it was a pretty massive success overseas. And then when it came to America, nobody really cared. And that's why they had to rebrand it as The Road Warrior, because people didn't really care about Mad Max. They're not going to go to Mad Max 2, but when you're thumbing through the paper looking at movies, maybe you would see a movie called The Road Warrior. So I guess that was the idea of the two titles.
It also gives what am I thinking? Gosh, I'm blanking on the damn movie. The Cabin in the Woods.
Evil Dead?
Evil Dead. It's
Sure.
giving Evil Dead 2, the beginning of Evil Dead 2, where you're just like, didn't this all happen already?
Right.
The first half
Sam
hour?
Raimi wanted to remake his own
Sam
movie.
Raimi, I'm sorry,
right.
listeners. My brain is blanking. Yeah, I feel like Evil Dead 2 is just like, okay, we got a little bit more money. We're going to do this again. We're going to do it right. We're going to reference the first one, but we're kind of also going to springboard off that and do something different here. So I was definitely feeling that, especially with the opening, the big opening sequence in this movie that's kind of got like the flashbacks and the black and white and talking about just kind of like the fall of civilization, I guess.
I think that's a perfect metaphor or analogy, analogizing it to the Evil Dead, because, if you listen to George Miller talk about making the first movie, he's by his own, he says he didn't know what he was doing. He was a fan of film, and that was it.
Yeah.
So interesting that he was a medical doctor.
Right.
He was a doctor, and
Wild.
I remember kind of reading on Wiki that when he would be working at the hospital, he would get a lot of car accident and motorcycle accidents that would come through the emergency room. And that, I think, just sort of built on the story of this movie revolving around cars and motorcycles, too, which I think is pretty fascinating, just to kind of build the idea of always seeing all of these accidents coming into the ER, and you're going to make this very dangerous movie involving cars and motorcycles.
Yeah. Although, I think by many accounts he was, he's so, in contrast to his sort of, personality, which seems very friendly. He's very strict on set. And one of the things is because of his concerns for safety. So I wonder if, he's inspired by this trauma maybe of seeing all these accidents, but then, having experienced it on the medical side, really making sure he wants to avoid those things.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. There's also something about his scripts where you just kind of, when you get to the closing credits and you look at the cast list and you look at these character names, you're just like, what am I reading?
Feral Child.
What is happening here?
Yes.
Wes, the captain's girl, warrior woman, the Humungus, like the toady, and like not even get me started on like Fury Road and like Furiosa, and those character names are just like, what is this man thinking of? The name, when you go into Wikipedia and look at like the names of the gangs, they're like the Gay Boys and like the Smegma, like
Right.
what?
Yep.
What are you talking about?
The Gay Boy Berserkers is, that's
the
a
Gay
good
Boy
one.
Berserkers. What is happening? I mean, I love it. I'm here for it. If the post-apocalyptic, war zone nightmare and the shit hits the fan, I've got motorcycle riding skills. Throw Scott on the back, and like we got some shit like we can deal with. But we gotta come up with a cool name. Apparently, I was also commenting on Max's like just iconic look, right, in this movie.
Well, and
because,
I think that's left over from being a police officer.
Well, that's the thing. In
too.
the first movie, he's like, we were talking about this earlier. In the first movie, it's like societal collapse is like happening, but there's still a police force that he's a part of. But there's also like these roving gangs, right? Okay, and we're on like the fringe of society. And as this cop, he's wearing this all leather kind of costume, right? So by the time we get to this movie, like one of the arms of his like jacket is torn off, like his gloves are like shredded to shit, like he just looks like, what did she say in Drop Dead Gorgeous? Rode hard and put away wet. Right. You know? And so this is like, and okay, so the sleeve that is gone, now there's like this shoulder piece right on there. And I was telling Scott, I was like, throw a wig and like a beard on him, and it's Blackbeard from Our Flag Means Death, right? I don't know if you watched
Yes,
Our Flag
no,
Means Death,
100%. And I wouldn't put it past Taika Waititi doing that purposefully.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
yeah, that was definitely his like Mad Max like homage, right?
Yeah.
But it's just such a cool look, and there's just so much like shit on it. Like there's like tchotchkes and like little like pouches and buckles and all, and it's just really. It's visually interesting, but it tells this story. And then, later on when we do get to this refinery town, which I want to talk about the refinery town, all the people there wear like white. And okay, they're the good guys. Right. But it's like you live in an oil refinery in the middle of the Australian Outback. And all their clothes are white.
They got a ton of stain sticks around. Yeah, and some shout.
There's a lot of shout. There's a lot of
a lot of bleach.
Yeah, yeah. What's the guy that sold the infomercial with that big?
Right.
Not CLR.
The shout.
Yeah, but but again, it's just it's telling a story through these costumes. I do love that they're just very clearly football pads.
Right.
Yeah. But I thought that those were American football pads. Do they wear those for like, I don't know. They don't wear those in rugby.
I guess that in Australia they would be playing rugby and not American football.
But they don't. So my point is, rugby players don't wear those big pads.
But there's something a little more cinematic about an apocalyptic woman wearing football pads.
Okay, the warrior woman, first of all.
Oh, she's fierce. I love her.
The warrior woman is amazing, and that she is played by Virginia Hay from Farscape.
Hi.
Virginia Hay from Farscape, which I'm the big like sci-fi nerd, and Farscape is even a little like nerdy. Like that shit is like
that's next level.
That's deep cut. Jim Henson, Canadian. No, it's not Canadian. It's Australian.
Oh.
But she's fierce in that too. She's bald. She's bald and she's blue, and she has like these eyebrows. But she's kind of amazing in this. Little side fact about the warrior woman: it's a little like Ellen Ripley was not written as a woman. Okay,
they just like the actress and they cast her.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, I think that it goes along a little bit with the Golden Youth, which we're definitely going to talk about.
Right.
And just these gender roles in the post-apocalypse. And just like, does it matter anymore? You know?
Sure.
Does it matter anymore now that the world's gone to shit? The warrior woman is kind of... She's a little bit of like a Max kind of mirror. She doesn't really talk a lot. When she does, it's like... she's got something to say when she does talk.
Well, she's fully going to shoot him at one point.
Well, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But, okay, so that all started with us talking a little bit about wardrobe.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're going to get into it, but I remember reading something, and obviously there's a question about whether or not there are gay themes, certainly, in the film. I don't think it can be argued that it's not homoerotic. Right. But I had read that the costumes, the BDSM, essentially, of the Humungus' gang was just a result of the costume designer having lived next to an S&M shop.
Yeah.
shit.
They said that we just watched the documentary, and the costume Norma Marceau, I think, that she would walk by this. I mean, it's essentially like a BDSM leather store. It's like a rough trade in LA. And she was just very fascinated with the looks of everything. So she went in and talked to him, and it ended up being a major kind of influence on the movie.
I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's super cool.
But again, it's become this visual language. It's become this aesthetic, this like Mad Max look, right? That when you need to go like post-apocalyptic or whatever, you're going to have like all of it, the leather and the hooks and the harnesses and everything.
Chaps.
Those were the ass part was probably destroyed in the apocalypse.
Sure. Yeah. Especially you're riding out there on this motorcycle, you're being dragged behind things, your ass first thing to go. But there's I mean, it's not as iconic, but I mean, there's like an American Dad episode that's like, it's after the rapture is the whole thing. But
that's right. Yeah. And then they have a whole Mad Max portion of the episode.
Right. But it's about like the Antichrist, but still it's like the people are dressed like that. And it's just, there's something, but it lends itself to that because the thing about S&M gear is that it's practical. There's buckles, there's
buckles and chains,
all that stuff. It's all there so that it's kind of a one size fits all. You can go in and getting yourself fitted. Let me tell you, for an actual leather harness, it's a whole day. You've been fitted for a harness.
I mean, I just have like a neoprene harness.
I know.
I have like the pussy version.
But even so, when you go, you're just like, okay, you go. And there's like so many different buckles and things that you have to like, you really get it fitted to yourself. But the thing is, it's like, it's all there. So it can be passed on from one person to another. And if you're riding, like leather is one of the things that's like, it's riding, motorcycle riding culture is just like wearing leather and studs, like studs on leather jackets that like the punks kind of took, in the 70s and the 80s, like all those studs, that's for riding, that's for putting on your jacket. So you slide when you fall off your bike, so that's all practical, but it looks fucking cool.
Yeah.
It looks really cool. And, the thing about like, the Wes and a lot of those guys have like these mohawk haircuts and like the hair dye, the hair color and all that. That it for a movie that came out in 81. For a movie that came out in 81, it really doesn't look that dated.
No, not at all.
The only thing that dates it is that when you do watch a modern Mad Max movie, is that they just are visually like bigger, I guess, right? Like the set pieces. We were talking about the refinery town in this movie. Yeah. And like the refinery town in this movie, it's big. It's this town that they live in, and they're pumping crude oil out of the ground and refining it into gasoline, right? So this is a big thing, and they built it real with like, they said that it's not a movie set. Like this shit was like
it was all pretty much practical.
Right? Practical. But you compare that to like Gastown,
the Metropolitan set in this new movie.
Yeah, in the new movie, and it just looks like a speck, right? So other than that, I feel like this movie does, because it's like timeless or it's this future, it really stands up to like time and like looking not very dated, right?
Yeah, and it's funny you say it that way because you think about it in the 1980s, it's and I think Mad Max, the first film, has just like a title that says like in the near distant future,
right?
Near future rather, and in the 1980s we were warned that nuclear holocaust was imminent and we were going to be living in a dystopian world.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, you're right. It seems, I don't know, I was going to say it seems timeless in that way, but maybe it's because when I saw it, I felt like this is a potential reality. So I'm kind of frozen in that moment when I first saw it. Although it gave me hope because everything you said, I thought, okay, cool. I get to wear cool clothes. Yeah. I'm going to have an awesome car.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't mind scrounging for gasoline, and these other things.
Cute guy in the back of your bike.
I mean, where they're finding water and food and all that, that's another story. Maybe, are we going to have to eat dog food out of a can? Maybe. But, these are the sacrifices that we need to make to look pretty cool. So, pardon me. So this movie kind of starts off with Max finding this truck.
Well, you kind of get introduced with him mid-adventure when he's being pursued by the motorcycle gang, too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We get introduced to Wes right off the bat. We get introduced to Max, the dog, right off the bat. And I'm saying all this because I want to get to the gyro captain, played by Bruce Spence. And I love the gyro captain character. It's interesting, though, because Max is really... he kind of leaves him for dead, right?
Oh, yeah.
A couple of times.
Yes,
That shot of the gun of the dog pointing the gun at him in the back of the car.
With the little bone.
The little bone
in his mouth.
So good.
When he sees the rabbit run by outside.
Oh, my God.
You know the whole story about the dog, right? They pick the dog up at the pound.
Right.
And the dog was pretty much on death row. The dog was going to be euthanized like that week, and they were looking for a dog that would train well and would read well on camera, and they found this blue heeler that was pretty easy to train, and this is a dog that is from the pound.
Love it. Love it.
Great movie dog, and
Love
then
a
ended
rescue
up
dog.
being adopted by one of the cameramen at the end of the movie.
I want that dog. I think it's beautiful looking.
Yeah.
It seems so loyal.
Just the image of Max walking on this empty road with the dog next to him is just like, oh my God.
He's a good boy.
Oh, what an image.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the scenes with the dog and the gyro captain are great. I think Bruce Spence is he's such a fun choice because he's so distinctive looking. He's just so lanky and thin. Bruce Spence has gone on to I think mostly because of this and because of Thunderdome.
Did it strike you as odd having seen Thunderdome first that then he plays another aviator?
Right.
And then
it's
seeing
not
this?
the same character.
Yeah.
And it's it was confusing.
Yeah, me too.
It was confusing.
Oh, I don't think that I knew that he was in
Yeah.
Thunderdome.
Yeah. And he plays yeah, it's weird. He's essentially playing the gyro captain, but it's not. It's or pilot. It's weird. Don't have too many questions.
Don't think about
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's the thing about the Mad Max timeline too. Is don't think too hard about it. What year is Fury Road set? What year is the Road Warrior set? He looks pretty much the same age. Don't think about it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's the future. It doesn't
Yep.
matter.
Max is supposed to be timeless.
Right. Bruce Spence was cast by Peter Jackson in The Return of the King. He plays the mouth of Sauron. He comes out and holds up Frodo's little chainmail vest, and he's like, "We've killed your little hobbit." And his face is wearing a mask, and you just see his big mouth. And it's like this giant, because the character is the mouth of Sauron. So they made his mouth they scaled it up. And then Viggo Mortensen chops his head off. But I think Peter Jackson was just like, we need to cast this character. We haven't cast. Let's get Bruce Spence. Let's just throw him in here. And then he is also in Revenge of the Sith. In a very small role.
And it seems funny, but I remember seeing that, and he's made up completely as an alien and thinking, is that Bruce Spence?
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that says... I don't know which way that goes for Bruce Spence. That he's so identifiable.
Yeah. How complimentary is it?
Yeah.
The Doug Jones of the 80s.
Yeah,
very Doug Jones.
Very much so. But I think it's just that thing that so much time had passed when they were making those movies that he had become this kind of touchstone of these genre movies, right? And as this character that is so memorable.
He needs to be in a Del Toro movie.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But it's interesting because Max, his treatment of this character of the gyro captain is I mean, I guess Max is not necessarily supposed to be like a. He's a good guy, but essentially he's just kind of out for himself.
He's the lone drifter. I mean, they talk about how the writing of Joseph Campbell was a big inspiration for this one in particular, of just kind of forming who Mad Max is as a character. And he's like the reluctant hero of a Joseph Campbell like story of the hero's journey. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know too much about I haven't read The Hero with 1,000 Faces. So
Yeah.
I'm not,
Yeah, and I don't recall it well enough to know in the sort of archetype of the reluctant hero. Does he use other people as a means to an end? Because
Right.
I think to your point, Pete, he just uses them for a while.
Yeah, so that was kind of my thing when I'm watching it. I'm just like, oh gosh, that makes you kind of question how much you like or are on board with Max, right? But I think that's part of the character. Part of the character, and I think George probably just like, okay, we're going to use Campbell as this like jumping off point, and then we're going to kind of go where we will with it. But is this kind of auto gyro that he's flying? I mean, you see it in the air, so like that's real.
I mean, it looks practical.
Oh my gosh.
It looks like he's up in the air in it.
I remember I want to say in the 80s, it was like the back of Popular Mechanics magazine that my dad would get, that you could order one, like the kit.
I was going to say.
It was like way too expensive, but it was something I coveted, definitely.
And they send it to you to like build?
That was the idea, yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh, that is wild.
That sounds so unsafe. But also, as a kid, I would be like, I need this.
Send your 12-year-old to go build your auto
out of household appliances.
Thank goodness they were too expensive. You'd probably see them flying all around.
Seriously, if they're cost effective, there'd be like children in the air. But yeah, that's the thing. It's like this looks real because it's flying out there. And probably could only carry one person at a time.
Well, he was going to squeeze that one woman in there.
Yeah. He was all about the girl with the side ponytail, right? The girl that looks super 80s.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the
she
sweat.
looks like
The headband, yeah.
She's a missing member of the Go-Go's.
The Go-Go's,
yeah.
yeah. I feel like she might be the one thing that ages the movie a bit, is that she looks super.
She looks the most like 80s workout.
Yeah.
The feral child, that little actor, made her that necklace too.
Oh, okay. So So the feral child, Emil Minty, he
said that he made her that necklace
that she's wearing in the movie.
Yep, that she's wearing in the movie.
Okay,
that's insane because you guys know he became a jeweler, right? He's regarded as that's what he does now. He's
wow.
He's got a life, with wife and kids, and he's a jeweler. Yeah, and he makes jewelry.
Oh, that's so interesting. See, he had a calling. He had a calling. He even knew it then. The feral kid is like, this character is wild. This
Bam Bam.
This Bam Bam. Yeah.
Can he actually talk? I don't know.
Well, he can because he's narrating the damn movie.
Oh, that's right. So he does eventually learns English, but he almost kind of sounds like a child that was never.
Like he was raised by dingoes?
He was raised by dingoes or wallabies or something.
Yeah.
And his life is the bush.
Right. Mm-hmm. And see, well, the thing about that is, which I'm kind of fascinated by feral children, like actual feral, like.
There's the whole thing with the language. That's what I was saying is that when a child is never learns how to talk.
Yeah. So the kind of what they've kind of found with these feral children, and usually. It's very rarely a case of like a child being raised by wolves, and it's mostly like horrible parents that like chain a kid to a bed.
Kids locked in the closet
for like 20 years or whatever. And what they find is, and that's fascinating, is that like if they never learn to speak, then their brain is like kind of the wires kind of get burnt out, and they never really develop a full language set.
It's what the Jodie Foster movie Nell is about.
Right.
They find this woman out in the forest
hanging
that
in the wind.
Her and her sister were there as little girls, and they never had human contact.
There you go. And
Liam Neeson plays like a speech therapist, I think.
Right.
The kind of finding out how Nell communicates with the world. Stay tuned later for our full Nell episode. I feel like that there is a reference of a movie that does anyone under the age of 35 even know the movie Nell?
well, it's our job to bring it to the children.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
I don't know that this kind of like theory or science or whatever was around in '82. So let's just say the feral child does learn to speak. But this character is crazy. Like, he looks nuts. Like, this wig, I don't know if it's a wig, I don't know if it's real hair, but
with that big ass boomerang.
That gauntlet that he has, that he catches a boomerang. Okay, so when he does throw the boomerang and catches it, that George Miller does a lot of stuff with like film speed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I don't think this is shot at 24 frames a second. I think that it's a little. Is it slower or faster? I can't
you mean
remember.
the whole film?
Not the whole movie.
I want to say most of the or maybe it's just the car scenes
car chases.
that they filmed it at a different film speed, just to kind of.
I recall this. This is very rudimentary knowledge from years ago, learning about filmmaking back then. It was something called skip printing, where what they would do is, because they didn't film at different speeds, they would just take like every frame. Let's say if you got 12 frames per second, they take 2 frames out every 12 frames.
Sure.
So you'd be missing frames, which makes it kind of at that sort of artificial.
Yeah,
skipping.
and I feel like that's what they do in those shots every now and then, where they kind of want to make a crash look a little bit more spectacular or whatever. But
and I don't know to what extent we'll talk about Furiosa, but one of the things I didn't like about it was I felt like he was using that a lot.
Sure.
In this contemporary film, which still seemed that effect seemed dated.
Yes.
Unnecessary.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with you. Yeah. I think they used it a little bit too in Fury Road, right? I feel like it was there.
Probably.
Yeah. But in Furiosa, you're right. I did notice it. But there's a big shot of the feral kid with his boomerang.
Right.
And when he catches it, they do that film speed thing. And it looked to me like it was in reverse, because I was like, how did they get this kid to catch that damn boomerang? But Emil Minty in the documentary talked about like some radio control situation. I don't know what was going on. I was like, that sounds fishy to me. It looks kind of like it's just done in reverse to have him catch it. They cut really quickly.
And even when it's flying around, it doesn't look. I don't know where they would hide the mechanics of it.
Yeah, it's just a thin like metal boomerang, but. I don't know. This is also just adds to the like super Australianness of this movie, that this kid is a boomerang,
right?
Like,
of course,
yeah.
And I look. I maybe I'm jumping out of sequence of this film though. Is I remember as a kid when the toady tries to catch it.
Oh my god!
It looked to me just like the effect was they threw a fistful of Vienna sausages in the air at the right moment.
Yeah, absolutely. That was that giving you what's the
Hard Ticket to Hawaii?
Hard Ticket to Hawaii.
The Frisbee? Hard Ticket to Hawaii? Yeah.
The Frisbee with razor blades on the end of it.
Andy Sedaris?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Wes and his little buddy, the Golden Youth.
Well, I'm obsessed that Terry O'Sullivan.
Who's this?
I think it's Jerry or
Jerry.
Terry.
Was it Terry?
Hold on.
Who are you talking
at least,
about? What is it?
Jerry O'Sullivan, who plays Golden Youth on the back of the bike. I'm obsessed that Jerry O'Sullivan has this Lana Turner story of how he was cast in this movie.
Right.
That George Miller talks about in his office, in his like film office, that they were looking to cast the Golden Youth, the guy in the back of this bike, and this kid was a mail courier, and he just came into the office, and they're like, holy shit, you need to be in this movie. And they offered him the role. And it's the only thing he's ever done.
Right.
Acting wise,
yeah.
He's gone on to do many things.
I'm sure he had a very fulfilled career in something, but I love that. And he just ended up as Golden Youth on the back of this bike,
right?
Mm-hmm. And his name, like Golden Youth, like what the fuck is that? I love that. And he has that beautiful bleach
George
hair
Miller.
too. Mm-hmm.
So that leads me to think that was just his look.
Sure.
Like that was his haircut. That was his hair was
just
already
a
bleached
bleach
out,
blonde punk.
and they just said that one. That's what you're looking for right there. And George Miller said, bring him in, have him sign this. So I guess Miller's kind of thought process was, your idea is this guy, this biker, he's riding this huge bike, and he's got the girl in the back.
Sure.
And so that's cliche. Let's change things up. Why not make it a boy? Okay, cool, right? So then now we have Vernon Wells, who says, we were kind of all told to create backstories for our characters. And his backstory was that Wes rescued the golden boy as a child and became like a surrogate father. And so that's why he's so upset. So
Depends on how you read it,
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
I guess I never really thought about that.
that
My
could
mind
be-
just goes to boyfriend, but
Yeah.
I guess he could be a father figure.
Yeah.
Now, just taking it back to when you first saw it,
Right.
did you realize it was a male character?
Because he's so pretty.
Yes. I'm not sure that I knew at the time. I don't know that I.
Yeah, I was gonna say I wonder because I was a teenager. It was probably or late teenager, maybe in my early 20s by the time I finally saw it all the way through. So at that point, I was just like, "Oh, this is interesting." And I think I just kind of thought it was a guy, thought it was a boy, and I think that there are shots. Isn't his little like harness situation kind of like, I think his chest is exposed.
You can see his chest.
Yeah, I think his chest is exposed in quite a few shots. So I was just thinking, like, what the hell what was the world thinking? Like, what was America thinking when they were like, what's going on here with this boy on this bicycle?
Maybe it goes down a little easier because they are the villains of the movie, too. if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting, though, is, obviously the 80s was a very different time, but I don't remember anybody caring or commenting either way about it,
Yeah. I think this movie is just such a kind of a trip in general, just like this mind kind of like, you just have to wrap your head
There's so
about
much crazy
the
shit
whole
going on.
world.
It just kind of, it's tossed on the pile.
You're just like, okay. He's like walking around with his butt hanging out and like this like, giant weightlifter, like
Dog
Jason
collar.
Voorhees, like, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
so.
I've had the chance to interview Vernon Wells twice.
Oh,
And he's a fun. Oh, actually, I got to show you this, guys. I have my shirt on here.
I love
it.
That's great.
And actually,
That's
I
great.
made this T-shirt the second time I saw him because it was in person, and he said, hey, "That looks like shit. What a waste of time that was." But he's a fun guy like that. But I was tempted to ask, like, push this idea. Okay, so he's your son. Why does he have a collar with a lock on it?
Yeah.
Why do you have him chained on a leash at some point?
Sure.
But I'll be honest with you, I was too intimidated to ask any of those questions. He had already kind of said his side, but he says it is, and I don't know that I would change his opinion.
Yeah, right.
I'd be
right,
curious
right.
to see what George Miller has to say about the whole thing.
Maybe if Wes does, maybe if the story's real and that's his son, he's the surrogate father. Maybe the kid's just like a problem child. He's a bad seed, so he's got to have him on a leash. I don't know.
This is our third Vernon
Wells movie.
We've done Weird Science, Commando,
Commando.
and now The Road Warrior. Which, is he kind of playing variations of that character in those other two movies?
Well,
kind
I think
of.
Weird Science is a play on this, but Commando, I mean, get out of town. Like, I love
His shirt in Commando.
Yeah.
That chainmail, international mail shirt.
And you guys probably covered this, but he was like a last-minute replacement, and they didn't change the costume.
Yeah,
Yep.
didn't quite fit him right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love that. So did he tell you that story or his thought process behind it in your
About
interviews?
being the father? No. I had
No.
read it, and I had a note, and I was like, you know what?
Let's leave it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Probably for the best.
He's established to me how masculine he is. I'm going to let it go.
Yeah. And I don't know. I feel like this character, it's like even if that is his like his boyfriend or his lover or whatever, that doesn't really diminish any masculinity. Like Wes is a pretty like
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think in our community, it's just like, sure, why not? That's a daddy right there, like
Leather daddy.
probably-
I mean, BDSM, the leather community, and the gays have always gone hand in hand, too.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting that I don't think that there's really anything problematic about those two characters. I mean, they're villains in the movie, so they're the characters that you don't want to root for, but I wouldn't call the characters homophobic at all. Or like how they're portrayed.
Sure, right,
too.
right. Yeah. No. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to be clear, my comment about his masculinity is from his perspective.
Right,
You know,
right,
he's
Sure.
a guy from a.
Absolutely.
That's the way he seems to perceive it.
Yes. But it's like, and also they're like working for the Humungus, who is the big bad in this
Oh, we gotta
movie.
talk
And-
about him.
And the Humungus is another one who's just out there dressed like a He-Man villain, right? With like this hockey mask, which we were like, is it giving Jason Voorhees?
Predates
Yeah.
Friday the 13th, Part 3.
Yeah.
All I'm saying.
Yeah. And not only the mask, but also like the
Yes, right.
the crazy head, like veiny,
What does he look like under there?
disfigured head, right?
Yeah.
What's going on under there? So the Humungus.
Have you seen what the actor actually looks like under there?
I haven't. Shel Nilsson. I mean, we've seen the body, but we haven't seen the face. I'm just looking through his IMDb, and it's just a lot.
There's
of
a bunch
Mad
of weird
Max.
pictures. I want to, because
Is
he's,
he in the
he's a
pirate movie?
bodybuilder from Sweden,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
I need to look up some bodybuilding pictures by him.
He's
And
in the
he's-
pirate movie.
He is. He's one of the pirates that are
Okay.
one of the. He's one of the pirates
Oh, okay. So is he the guy with the big beard? Oh, I think that's
in the pirate movie. No,
Yeah.
he's clean shaven. He's got kind of a face that's contrary to the character he plays in Road Warrior for sure.
Okay. All right. Interesting. All right. Well, we're definitely going to look up some Shel Nilsson without the beard.
Everything I'm finding is either him as an old man or the character in the movie. I'm trying to find. Okay, here's one. Here's like a beefcake
Oh,
modeling
work.
shot.
All right.
Oh, and
damn.
Yeah. That is a tree of a man right there.
Servant body.
Yeah.
6'3". Okay. Yeah.
Well, and Vernon Wells seems like he's, a sizable guy in the
Yeah.
movie and pretty well shaped. And then when after his the golden youth is killed and Humungus has to calm him down, he's like twice
Yeah.
the size of him or
Yes.
something. He's
That-
enormous.
I thought that too. I was like, I thought Vernon Wells was like a big dude. He doesn't
Yeah.
look that big compared to the Humungus, which I guess his name is the Humungus. So he's wearing a studded codpiece. I thought it was like a whole like brief situation, but it looks to be like either a codpiece or a jock that's studded over like a black brief, and then he's got a wrist cuff also studded, and then the full gauntlet up to his elbow.
And he has that type of
Also
harness that
studded.
it's not a shoulder harness, but it connects in the center of his
It
stomach.
connects in the center.
Yeah.
Well, you know what this kind of harness looks like? It looks like the kind of okay. Sorry, everyone, but this looks like the kind of harness that the front piece goes down to. It goes down to a cock ring.
Yeah.
So that's what looks like is going on here. Just so you all know. And then we have the hockey mask, which is iconic. So George Miller also mentioned that he wasn't sure if they were going to have to do like a Darth Vader situation, right? He's wearing
Completely
a hockey mask.
ADR his voice.
We're not going to be able to hear much.
How
on
much of
set.
the audio is going to be usable? And he's also from Sweden.
Right.
So
Right.
But then it just turned out that like the accent and everything kind of
it just kind of worked. Yeah.
So they're like, just use it. And yeah, it does kind of work. I kind of love this character. Just when he is up there, kind of shouting in the megaphone, you're just like, yeah, this guy sounds crazy. But I can also see all these people like, all right, let's do this.
And I remember certainly when I saw it younger, I thought he was terrifying, because of
yeah.
his size, the hidden face, and I felt similar way about in Fury Road. I like the idea that they had Immortan Joe have a mask on and was
Right.
He had some things that made him seem muscular. Maybe he wasn't. Another in Furiosa, I don't know. Chris Hemsworth with the nose. He still looked like a Hemsworth brother, so
Right.
he wasn't. I don't know.
Yeah. So it's interesting that, starting with this movie is where we really get these like grotesque characters, right? And they kind
Like
of
there's something about his mask that's almost holding in his face from falling apart. That's what I kind of get from it.
Right. And then, but that's kind of all we see. We see the mask, and then there's some shots from behind where we do see that his head is like something's going on under there. And like you said, there may have been some sort of situation. Then we go. I feel like in Thunderdome there is some kind of like grotesquerie, but by the time we get to Fury Road, it's like all bets are off. There's just like everyone's deformed. Like you're lucky if you're just like average like looks. There's people have like tumors, and the Immortan's mask. What we do find out later on is that like his entire jaw is missing from like his mandible's gone from the bottom, like all that stuff. Yeah. And then same thing. Well, not the same thing, but also in Furiosa, there's stuff with like those women that are like with the missing limbs and all that stuff going on. So this idea of these grotesque characters kind of really starts here with the Humungus and just keeps building as these movies go forward. But
it almost seems to me, I don't know if this is correct, but it seems like the Cenobites in Clive Barker's Hellraiser are kind of an evolution of that, including the S&M gear,
sure,
and the grotesque bodies.
Yeah, and the gear kind of like. Yeah, something about the body horror of it's not just they look that way, but these things are like making them that way, or like what they're wearing and like hooks and all these things like digging into them. But like you were saying, the thing about the Humungus character is that he is scary. Like it is successful in that it's a scary character, right? You're just like, oh my god,
and you can kind of see why this town is reluctant to take his deal of, are you sure that's a good idea?
Right.
Just to let him take their little gas town, and is he really just going to let them wander on their merry way in the outback?
Yeah.
With an escort? I don't know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I do love that one woman in the town that's just like, let's just do it. just listen to him. He said he's going to let us live. Come on, let's just get the hell out of here. Everybody's like, no.
You know what I was really struck with watching it in this viewing? This movie is maybe 97 minutes
It's short,
long.
yeah.
More action movies under 100 minutes. And when you break down the story of this movie, it's a pretty simple plot.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's a pretty straightforward story. And maybe that's something that was a little missing from a movie like Furiosa, where the movie is just constantly going. That there's just something about the simplicity of the Road Warrior and even Fury Road. I mean, Fury Road is pretty much just a long chase scene. It's like a singular line of a plot that it goes forward and then it backtracks. That I think it's really successful of just kind of how straightforward the story that revolves around this town and just kind of needing Max's help to get this tanker to haul the gas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do love a tight 95-minute action movie though. That's kind of
like we hit pause last night and we're like, oh shit.
There's only half an hour
There's
left.
only like less than 30 minutes of this movie to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Miller talking about how he wanted to make films that you didn't need to see the subtitles if you were watching it in another country, and that just seeing the action alone would stand for it.
Right.
And I think, if that's sort of the impetus behind making them so tight as they are, I love that, and that is something a problem I have with Furiosa, and I see a few folks praising it because, all right, finally we slowed down and did all this character development, but we didn't have in the other films, and I thought. The efficiency of the other films and the tropes they use, the archetypes, I feel like I got it. Like I knew what was going on.
Yeah. That was one of our biggest issues walking out. We'll get to that in a minute.
I mean, I think that he cites also just kind of Buster Keaton and the silent movies. I mean, the silent movies, they do some wild shit in those movies. These are some jackass level stunts that they were doing in the 20s.
Right.
And he wanted to do that as kind of, I mean, that was a big inspiration when he was creating this universe, is to kind of create this action movie that kind of led its storytelling with these action visuals.
Yeah. And then also this one is kind of famous for the character of Max. What did you has less than 20 lines in this movie?
And
right?
two or three of them are I need gas.
Or just want
I want gas.
I just want
yeah.
gas. And I think that's successful. I think his intention of it being something that you could understand without kind of paying attention to the dialogue, I think it is successful in that. I think you are kind of able to just be like, okay, now here we are. Now we're gearing up for this big fight. Now we're gearing up for this action sequence. And then when it does get to the final kind of chase with Max driving this rig, you do see a little bit of Fury Road and then Furiosa again in that last chase, but it's just kind of pared down a little bit because it's 1982.
Logistics of
yeah,
filmmaking.
the logistics,
yeah.
right. But I think it's still just as impactful as those.
I mean, I think that they sell all of those cutaways to Mel and the kid in the truck. That it does look like they're speeding down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought when I was watching it too. Thinking that I know a lot of the stunts they did were dangerous, so we know that at least one stuntman was injured in an accident that they kept in the movie.
Oh yeah,
my God!
You see him flipping when it's like a motorcycle that hits that truck and he goes flying. That shot is wild of seeing him like cartwheel in the air.
Yes. But I was thinking, like, they couldn't have put this little kid in danger. Like, maybe Mel Gibson signed up to do some of his own stunts.
Right.
But you're right. You buy it. You totally buy it.
Yeah. When there's like those shotgun shells on the hood of the
when
rig,
he's crawling
and he's like,
over the hood,
and Max is telling him. See, that's the thing. Max is putting him in danger.
Yeah, it's like with the gyro captain.
Get the shell. Get the damn shell. And but there's also the shot of the gyro crashing, and I'm like, well, that's got to be a dummy. Like the gyro crash falls out of the sky.
Yes.
Like I hope that's a dummy because that looked really dangerous. And there's a couple of really big dangerous looking stunts, but they're all sold really well. And just the fact that they're able to go out there and wherever the hell backcountry outback town they were in that had these long stretches of road with nothing there.
Seeing filmed in Broken Hill in Australia, and it was an old mining town.
Okay. And they said it was like 800 miles out of Sydney or something.
I think so.
Looks pretty deep in the outback. Mm-hmm. We were talking like we're Americans. I'm from Southern California, which makes me even less knowledgeable about the rest of the world. I was like, how far into the outback do people live? Like, I thought pretty much most of Australia is just around the coast, right?
I think there has to be at least small mining towns like this all throughout.
Yeah.
Crocodile Dundee taught me that most of it is dangerous.
That's it.
Yes.
There you go.
Oh, there is some shit that can kill you in Australia.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about this movie that makes it kind of like the jump from here and even Thunderdome to Fury Road is just like there's vegetation on the side of the road in this movie. There's like some like shrubs and things, which kind of makes it look like a real place. Whereas like by the time we get to Fury Road and Furiosa, it just looks like this. Like they're on another planet, right? Because it's just complete desert. It's completely just sand dunes, and then whatever little oasis or whatever there's the oasis, the oil town, and the bullet farm. Mm-hmm. That's it. But in this, it's like okay, they crash and there's just like shrubs on the side of the road. It's just like you're driving down the highway. It's like the visual language kind of shifts so much more, But I guess Fury Road is just meant to be a little bit of a reboot.
Yeah, I think that George Miller approached it as a sequel / reboot retelling of Mad Max.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I mentioned before is that the timeline is I don't think that you're supposed to think too hard on it.
Yeah.
especially with the age of Max.
You mentioned Crocodile Dundee. Do you think that these movies had an impact on America's love affair with Australia in the middle 80s?
The Aussies were having a moment in the 80s.
It's hard to know, right? Which came first? Did we love Australia and they started giving us more content, or did they just the Board of Tourism was like, let's just pump out content and hope for the best?
Right.
Well, I was reading a little today about the Australian New Wave cinema, which was this kind of resurgence in the popularity of movies from Australia, particularly in the United States. And it kind of began in the early 1970s and lasted to the mid-80s. I mean, kind of notable movies from the Australian New Wave that you might be familiar with is Walkabout, Picnic at Hanging Rock, My Brilliant Career, Gallipoli by Peter Weir, The Year of Living Dangerously, I mean, BMX Bandits, Crocodile Dundee. So there was all sorts of fun movies coming out of Australia at that time that had crossover appeal in the States.
And I think we got incepted other ways, right? The first Australian I can think of being aware of, Olivia Newton-John.
Oh,
I knew it.
absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I knew you were gonna go there because
That was the entree.
Yeah, really. And I don't know how much either of you will remember, but Olivia Newton-John had she had a stake in these stores, and they were like Australian themed retail stores, and they were called Koala Blue, and they would be in like a mall. Right. And you would go into Koala Blue and they would have like clothing from like Australian like designers, but then they would also have like just tchotchkes, just, rain sticks. And
A didgeridoo.
A didgeridoo.
I remember when my mom went to Australia because my parents are big hunters and fishermen, so they go to Australia every few years, and they still do. I remember my mom bringing me back a didgeridoo and a what the kid throws, a
boomerang.
And a boomerang. Yep.
But it wasn't a metal sword.
No, yeah, right.
Yeah, but I made a list here. This is all the Australian things I remember as a kid that really, obviously the Road Warrior and Olivia Newton-John. Men at Work.
Ah, there you go.
Paul Hogan, before he became Crocodile Dundee, I grew up in the New York City area.
Okay.
His sketch comedy show from Australia was being shown in the New York State in the tri-state area for some reason. And, Crocodile Dundee. Do you remember the Energizer commercials? Oi, Energizer!
Oh yes, I do.
That was Mark Jacko Jackson. It was another big a big footballer.
Yes,
And,
I forgot about that.
In Excess,
Yes.
Midnight Oil, Yahoo Serious, Foster's for Beer Mate. Outback started in the 80s.
Outback Steakhouse, that's right. Yeah, Yahoo Serious had two movies. He had Young Einstein and then something else.
Yeah.
I used to work at an Outback in college.
Young Einstein made 0 cents. Why was he living in Australia?
It probably made the same amount of money, too.
Oh,
0
yeah,
cents.
yeah. 0 cents. Yeah, that's true. There was it wasn't just, it was all that. We had a strange love affair.
The Rescuers Down Under.
Yeah, they went all the way down under for a
I
sequel.
love the character of Joanna.
And Joanna was
She was
Gila
George
monster?
C. Scott's, like a Gila. But it's the lizard, the big fan. I don't think that's a Gila monster.
It had to be native to Australia because that's where it took place. Yeah, I think definitely these movies had to have something to do with that. But you're right. I think Olivia Newton-John kind of ushered in this era where we were just like, look at this place. It's just that one big beach, and everyone's beautiful and blonde, and they have this fun accent.
I think that when we did Meryl's Wedding years ago, that I remember watching Meryl's Wedding when I was around probably 12 years old, and not really getting that it was a foreign movie, that it was set in Australia, but it's just one of those things that I think that my child brain couldn't really wrap my mind around. A movie from a different country where they spoke English, and it clearly was not England. That I think that it took me a minute to figure out, This is from Australia.
Yeah, but no, I remember being fascinated with it and just seeming like, as a small child, just being like down, like the whole like down under kind of idea, just being like, it's at the bottom, like what?
Yeah.
The drains, the water drains in the other direction. Is that true? Or is that a myth?
I think it's been myth busted.
I think it's sort of, it's up for debate. I think
it's been myth busted.
we just automatically go to the Simpsons episode where Bart has to go to Australia to be kicked in the
See, the Simpsons went to Australia.
by the Prime Minister. I also love the subgenre or like the subcategory of movie stars from Australia. I mean, do we have Mel Gibson to thank for that?
Right.
Of just kind of these huge A-listers that are from Australia.
Right. I mean, after Mel, it kind of was a while until we got Nick.
Because Nick really didn't break until, I mean, she was doing stuff like Dead Calm and Days of Thunder, but she didn't really break to be a huge star outside of being the wife of Tom Cruise until like 95 when To Die For and Batman Forever came out.
Sure. Yeah.
And then the late 90s saw Cate Blanchett.
And Naomi.
Yep.
Yeah. And now we have Hemsworth. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about... let's move forward a little bit and go to our thoughts. And, I mean, I guess we're just going to jump right into Furiosa because that's what's...
Yeah. I mean, what a moment of, like, back in 2015 of when Fury Road came out. I mean, everybody was talking about that movie when it came out. So I think it seems natural that you're going to take that character and do its own spin-off movie. And I remember reading when that was announced that Charlize was not going to be in the prequel. It was going to be Anya Taylor-Joy. And I kind of had mixed thoughts about it.
Yeah. That
I kind of understand that they have to cast younger for a prequel, but I kind of just want Charlize.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, boy. I've got so many thoughts about this one.
No, yeah. I mean, I kind of thought, too, why did it even need to be a prequel? Why can't they just, give us Furiosa's, like, further adventures?
I mean, the timeline in Furiosa is kind of muddy, and listeners also, if you have not seen Furiosa you don't care for spoilers, I would probably fast forward a little bit in this episode or go see Furiosa and then press play on in your podcast app. But, I mean, the timeline's pretty muddy because the ending of Furiosa, it goes right into Fury Road. So they very well could have used the same actress.
Yeah. And, oh, my goodness. For me, and the idea that it's a prequel versus a sequel or a spin-off for following that character in later adventures, I think that's the whole issue I have with this, in the sense that we were talking earlier. You said like Fury Road, it starts off as a chase and it's pretty much just a chase, which George Miller wanted to do a movie beginning in the late 1980s. I just want it to be a chase, he said. It's going to start off as a race and then go into a chase. And for me, Road Warrior has that same kind of energy. Thunderdome, Max pauses a little bit and he has a sort of little adventure kind of thing. But there's some kind of forward energy about these films that Furiosa is counter to. And I thought there was a perfect scene in Furiosa that summed it up for me. In Fury Road, I believe it is, at the very beginning of the movie, we have this sort of calm. And Max sees something's happening. We don't know what he's worried about, but he jumps in his car and drives away. And then just a moment later, these other cars come over the camera and chasing after him. In Furiosa, we had a similar scene where these bikes fly over the camera and then they make a U-turn and go backwards. And I felt very much like the film was like that. Like we just kept going back to things, and I didn't know why.
Sure. Yeah. One of the first things that we kind of said to each other as we were leaving was just like, it took way too long for it to even get to Anya, right? We're at like little girl Furiosa.
I think we're almost at minute 50 before they entered until you see Anya Taylor-Joy.
Right.
Yeah. And then, I understand we talked a little bit about George Miller and these character names and their names being kind of crazy. But also, we don't really know that these are their actual names. Her name as a child is Furiosa. Like
Yeah.
It's a little silly.
I kind of
Little
get.
little Furiosa.
I kind of
come
get
back
that
here.
once she starts working for Immortan Joe and becomes Imperator, that like, okay, she's like this crazy woman, whatever. She's an Imperator. Great, Furiosa. That's her nickname when working at the Oasis and driving this big rig. But that's her name as a little child.
Yeah.
Like what? It's so weird.
Yes.
I thought that was a little kind of movie cliche kind of thing where it's like they do that thing where they flash back to a character as a child and they've got the same haircut that they have like as an adult, just so we know. Like, come on. So that to me right off the bat, I was like, oh, okay, this is where we're going with this. But I think with so much of young Furiosa, I think that could have been tightened up a little bit.
Yeah, right. And then we have to do a lot of growing with the adult version or the older version. I guess we don't know how old she is.
Right,
She's probably still a teen, I'm thinking, since
Yeah.
I think Fury Road is 15 years later.
Right.
So
And then there's the whole idea, which I think they kind of drop, but the whole idea of her kind of disguising herself as a boy.
oh my goodness. There
With this face.
Wait, I feel like first, also counter to this forward energy that I feel like the other films have, the chapters. So we
Right.
know that
Sure.
Fury Road. What I've seen George Miller talk about this. Furiosa was a result of writing backstories for the characters. So they had one for Furiosa, they had one for Max, and then he said, "Hey, we can make these into movies." I feel like it feels that way. Like maybe reading it would be great, but the energy and stuff. Anyway. But you have these chapters, and some of them ended, and then the beginning of another one, I was like, wait.
Yeah.
I get the idea of finishing early and starting late in storytelling, but hang on a second.
Right.
Was she underneath that bridge? How'd she get out from underneath that bridge or whatever that was, and then disguise herself? Because suddenly she's a boy, and skipping ahead another time, how does, to your point, Pete, about maybe her getting a name from Immortan Joe, how come he's not like, wait a second, you escaped years ago. I'm pissed at you.
Yeah.
Get back in your
I
cage.
still hate you. Yeah.
They didn't deal with that at all.
I thought that too. They missed that.
I also felt like the character that Tom Burke plays was kind of one of the more interesting parts of the movie because you
Right.
kind of see where Charlize kind of built her trucker personality. It's from this character, Jack.
Yeah.
And I feel like he was kind of underutilized in the movie, which is too bad because those are the scenes with Jack and Furiosa that I kind of felt the most invested with.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other interesting thing that came out of that was we saw a little glimpse of how she might be able to trust a man again in the future. That when Max comes along in Fury Road, she very quickly, they kind of establish a rapport in a truck in particular. But yeah, that was too short for me too.
And
as
she
well.
kind of, I mean,
liked
Furiosa kind of models her whole look after Jack too, of just how the character is introduced with the black makeup on the face too.
Yeah, because we never really see. Yeah, I guess that's just like they're referred to as Praetorians in this movie, but then they're Imperators in Fury Road. But I'm assuming they're the same kind of functionary for the Immortan because they're driving these rigs for him.
Right.
And the Imperators, they do show others, and they do show other Praetorians, and they have this look of the black makeup on their foreheads, blacked out foreheads. It's very like high fashion, but it also like serves a purpose in this. But you're right, though, it is kind of where she gets this look and this kind of identity, and I don't know if maybe there was enough to build the entire story around them, but I think we could have.
Kind of unceremoniously dies too.
Right.
Like
Yeah,
he
and I
just
would say-
he just gets dragged off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was another moment where we were just supposed to understand he's dead, I guess, because the dogs go after him.
Right.
But we didn't spend enough time. I cared, but I didn't. I would have cared a whole lot more if I saw more of their relationship.
Right. I think Chris Hemsworth is. I think he does a good job, right, as this villain. He's a very wordy
I mean,
villain.
the character pretty much like overtakes the movie. I mean, kind of like what Furiosa did in Fury Road to Mad Max. I would say that it kind of becomes a lot of Chris Hemsworth movie.
Sure.
After a bit in this runtime.
Yeah. I mean, there were moments where I was just like, just stop talking, but that's the character. Like that's built in. You want him to shut up because he won't shut up, right?
Yeah. Did you guys see where he modeled his character after?
No. What did he say?
He tells the story that he was having a difficulty finding the voice, and he was in a park with his kids, and there was a sign that said, "Don't feed the seagulls." He said, so of course we started feeding the seagulls. And he said the seagulls have this really annoying sound they make, and they're very aggressive. And so that's why he has that sort of nasally voice. I think that's why he has the sort of pronounced nose, why he wears the flowy feather-like cape
it's like
at the beginning.
The parachute cape situation.
Well, I take it that the parachute cape is something from his children. That's kind of that's his character's backstory. It's like about the loss of a child. I mean, kind of like with Mad Max. And his child. I take it that's where the cape came from.
Oh, because he's got like the teddy bear?
And he has the teddy bear?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Did either of you get that? That's what I was thinking of.
The bear, certainly, yeah. I didn't get the cape thing. But to your point about his acting, I think he was great in the role. I think it was, but just to me, as far as, like I said earlier about Humungus, I wasn't scared of him, really. Like, even when it came down to the horrible thing that happens to her mother that he has his people do, he has his people do it, so it feels, I don't know, he didn't get his hands dirty enough, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's probably part of the character to make him kind of a little cowardly, you know?
Yeah.
Like, there's the one shootout where he's kind of behind the pillar, you know, and he's like throwing guys out there to like get her to shoot. So I think that's part of like he's supposed to be cowardly, so that's a little bit more of why he's so evil, you know. But it does make him less scary as a bad guy. Like that's just kind of like the effect of building that into his character. I thought it was fun that we get to see a little bit more of these crazy, like grotesque characters that we did see in Fury Road. The guy who runs the bullet farm and the guy who runs who goes on to run Gastown, the big fat guy and all that.
Whose name is something like Baby Eater or something like that.
Yeah, it is. It's I'm gonna find it in here because I have it. The People Eater.
People
Eater, yeah. The People Eater. There's
There's the
these
two
names are
brothers
wild.
over in the Citadel too.
Right, Rictus and Scrotus. Mm-hmm. Scrotus is a new character. We didn't see him in Fury Road, but Rictus.
Yeah, Rictus is there.
Rictus is there
in Fury Road.
I thought just like with maybe it was just me, but Chris Hemsworth I thought was fairly easily recognizable as his villain. I wish they went a little like Colin Farrell as the Penguin, and he just disappeared into the character.
Yeah,
but is it Josh Hellman who plays Scrotus, who was also in Fury Road?
Right.
And I thought, oh, that's Josh Hellman. I mean, that felt very distracting.
Okay, that's fair. I didn't catch it until I was reading the cast list on our way home. So, yeah, to me it worked, but yeah, I don't know. I kind of there was something the whole time thinking, who the hell is that? So maybe that was part of it because I was just like every time he was on screen, I was just like, I couldn't place him, but I knew it. So maybe I did know, but yeah.
With regard to seeing the other characters from Fury Road, I don't know. I felt a little bit, and maybe at this point in the movie, I was just picking on everything because I was just so disappointed. Sure. But I felt a little bit. It was like Solo, where it's like, and this is how he gets his gun, and this is how he. It's like,
yeah, I see that. One of Scott's biggest gripes is that.
Are you talking about the shaved head?
She didn't cut her hair.
Yeah. I mean, there's something about a wigged, shaved head,
buzz cut
cap, buzz cut that doesn't really sit well with me. I mean, I get that Anya's like booked and blessed. She has to keep those blonde locks. But, I mean, Charlize shaved that head.
Yeah.
That's how serious she took it.
And Charlize has beauty contracts, too.
Mm-hmm.
Charlize has beauty contracts with Dior and Dior's fragrance, but I'm sure like she does commercials.
There was going to be that awkward time when she's growing out that hair.
Charlize had beauty contracts at the time, but Anya says it was because of her beauty contracts.
Sure, which I get it. I
was going to say, more distracting than the bald cap with the short hair was the long hair, I thought.
Yeah.
Which looked a little like feral kid to me at times.
Right. Yeah.
I would have liked kind of a more of a heavy metal wig, like that they gave the kid in the Road Warrior.
A Tina wig, but like an actual Tina Turner wig?
Like a Tina wig. I love
like,
the feral child's wig. There's some, like, gray in it.
Yes.
Well, it's kind of mirroring Max, too, because
Yeah.
Max has his little gray streak.
He has these, like, rock and roll
Yeah.
gray streaks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys, I'm sure you've come across that theory that in Fury Road, Max is actually the feral kid, which Miller has said is not true.
Right. I guess there is a comic that kind of retcons that. So, let's see. A Vertigo comic series co-written by George Miller establishes that Tom Hardy's Mad Max is the same character.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
Which is fine. But I also kind of love the idea that Mad Max could be this kind of like Dread Pirate Roberts kind of moniker.
Yes.
That these people out there, this is now that it's, this post-apocalyptic
I mean, it would make
war
sense
zone.
with the timeline. Too.
Right. It would make sense with the timeline, but also this idea that like kind of going back to like, I don't know, like medieval days or whatever, like how the hell do you know what people look like? You hear about them, but without television or whatever, it's kind of like, oh, you're the king, you're so-and-so, like, I guess, like, so so it's kind of a fun idea for the Mad Max name to be this kind of like a Dread Pirate Roberts, just like, now I'm Mad Max, and it's like, but how could you be? My grandfather told me stories about Mad Max, but I think that could be something that maybe we could build, or, they could build towards if they keep doing these, who knows, but
I don't know. I don't imagine he's getting another one after this. I know he wanted to do a Mad Max prequel too.
I think there's Mad Max the Wastelands that is kind of sort of in pre-production. I think that they were waiting for some of the opening weekend numbers to officially green light it from Warner, but it didn't really open to great numbers. I think that Fury Road had a higher gross. There was a lot of clickbaity deadline headlines this weekend that it was the lowest grossing Memorial Day weekend since Return of the Jedi. They later corrected that. It is actually since Casper in 95. But movies that open on Memorial Day weekend that open at around $30 million, probably not great.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I actually read that when you adjust it for inflation, it hasn't been as bad. The worst it's been since 43 years earlier with Richard Pryor's 1981 film Bustin' Loose.
Oh, Bustin' Loose.
I
was going to say, don't say the toy.
Which I think maybe paring these movies down in budget might do it some favors. Like, I think it would be kind of cool to see a movie like this made now without a bigger budget, that it's kind of something a little more like The Road Warrior. Maybe that's not realistic with just how movies are going now, that audiences wouldn't get seeing a movie that doesn't look like it has a that doesn't look like it has a budget of like $200 million.
Well, I want to bring something up in that the Fury Road, I think that a lot of people threw around this idea of little to no CGI, which is ludicrous, right?
Especially for movies like this.
Tom Cruise and the whole Top Gun gang, shut the hell up. There was a shitload of CGI in that movie. And if you watch 2 minutes of the closing credits, you can tell, right? So this idea of like, oh, these movies are going back to like no CGI. Shut up. It's there, right? Deal with it. Live with it. This is the world we live in. But Fury Road, a lot of the chase scenes were very, quote unquote practical, right? I think that this movie, Furiosa, really did feel a lot more digitally enhanced than Fury Road did. Fury Road it did feel like, hey, this feels like they really went out there and shot all this shit, and this looks so real and looks so in camera. And this Furiosa did really feel a lot more digital. It did feel a lot more CGI enhanced or whatever. It felt like there was a lot more effect work done in this. And you want to go bigger in your sequel. You want to go, amp everything up, and they did. But especially when you saw Fury Road, and you're like, wow, they're able to make this huge spectacle and still have it as pared down as possible with the CGI. And it was so effective. And then now we're like, we're going back to just a big, computer graphic, like, explosion fest. So I don't know. I feel like it was almost, they were trying to go steps forward with how big they can make it, but it felt like a couple of steps back because it was so digital, I guess.
I agree.
Yeah.
I found it very distracting.
Yeah.
It seemed almost to me like it was, some shoots they did post-production, like, oh, we need this shot.
Right.
But I don't think it was. I just think instead, and it was part of the production process. And I wonder how much of that is based on the fact that we know since 2015 there's been this real crunch in the graphics among the graphics departments that do these things, right, as far as time and budget, et cetera, to get these things done, without the money or the resources they need. And so you get stuff that's is inferior compared to movies from 9 years earlier.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a whole other conversation, like you said, with these effects houses and all of that. But I don't know. I still had fun with it.
Same.
There was fun stuff.
Maybe we were being a little too hard on it. I think that the thing is, a movie like Fury Road set the bar so high that maybe we were just going in with unrealistic expectations.
I think I was stunned a little bit by. I feel like George Miller is such an effective storyteller. Mm-hmm. When you look about Road Warrior, Fury Road, even his other films, he wrote Babe.
Yeah,
crying out loud. I mean,
makes a really good family movie. I mean, his Oscar is for Happy Feet.
Yes,
yeah.
So he can tell a story. But so there were things in this that I thought, all right, is this an Emperor New Clothes kind of thing? Because, for example, again, this is a big spoiler if you don't want to know. Yeah. When she's finally gets Chris Hemsworth's character, what is she there, like 15 minutes just talking with him about, or let's be quiet now? I don't know. It just sucked the air out of the film for me, building up to this moment where, and then we don't even know what really happened.
We don't even know what really happened. That was the part that got me. It was like, you gave us that whole conversation, and then it's like, well, and this, it was very like Clue the movie, and this is how it could have
That's exactly what I thought. Yeah.
And the VO, and I get that when you watch these older movies, the VO is kind of a theme of that all of these movies do have voiceover, but with Furiosa, it kind of felt like they were trying to get themselves out of a corner with editing that maybe it didn't cut together, so they had to put it in at the last minute.
Yeah. And along those lines, I feel like the ending of the film, how it ties so closely to Fury Road, so much so that the credits, the ending credits are clips from Fury Road that Miller realized, oh, shit. The reason why this movie, people are going to see it is because Fury Road. Mm-hmm. Let's remind them. I can make good movies.
Look how great this was. Remember this? Yeah. And that was the thing, too, kind of showing those clips. Like, they were not fully black and white, but like some things would be like brought out in color and all that. But like, man, when Fury Road was released in 4K, and then there was like the black and white edition,
the chrome version.
Yeah, we were like so stoked. Right. Like, we're gonna watch the black and chrome version. Like any way we can see it, it's like so cool. We're just like stoked to see it again. We saw it at the drive-in, like.
Oh yeah, we saw this during the pandemic at the Tiki Drive-in and outside of Pomona. It's like Pomona, right?
Pomona, yeah.
Pomona, and George Miller introduced it. This is like deep in the pandemic where no movies were coming out, and they were double featuring movies, and this was paired with Death Race 2000.
The original
Death Race
2000, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we were just like fucking like on board with
everybody honking when they were driving their car, which I think that they later after that showing had to kind of make rules that you weren't supposed to honk your horn.
Yeah.
Because it was a little too distracting.
But in the intro, the filmed intro, George Miller was like, "Honk your horn." We were like, "Okay." Yeah, so it was great. But yeah, I feel like this one I'll watch again. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something about how you're right. It's just not as tight storytelling wise. It's a little too drawn out to just kind of want to sit down and just like rewatch.
I think the whole not having Charlize factor was a kind of a big deal breaker for me. I didn't hate it, but it was, I don't know. I just want Charlize. Where's Charlize? And I kind of wonder with her that I know that the production was very vigorous. That, I mean, these movies are notoriously hard shoots that everybody hates each other by the end of it. I mean, I'm sure that maybe Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron have kind of made amends that they were not getting along at the time of production. Yeah. Just because I think that these shoots are just such a bitch that maybe Charlize just didn't want to do it again.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
But I mean, I still would tell people to go see it. I still would recommend it. Because I think there's something in it for people. And it's still visually just so cool. Like some of the stuff that they did with like those like motorcycles with the big propellers and flying around, and one of them's like got the big like balloon tail like going. I thought some of the visually, I was like, okay, this is really fun. This is really cool. So that stuff I really loved. So yeah, I mean, just a little nitpicky.
It makes for a good double feature of that if you were to watch Furiosa and then you go back and watch The Road Warrior again, that you really see this premise stripped to its bare bones and just at the heart of it. Yeah. These are scrappy independent movies. Yeah. Like these are very low budget movies made out in the middle of nowhere. And look what they did in a film like The Road Warrior.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and I certainly won't discourage folks from seeing this. I do think it certainly feels of that world and has enough of the connective tissue, including some of the action pieces, like you said.
Yeah. But I mean, going back to Mad Max 2 for the Road Warrior, I feel like we bought it on 4K. We've got our 4K physical.
The sound
edition
of that disc, holy shit!
It sounds crazy.
That Brian May score. I was like,
oh yeah.
I mean,
the mix on our 4K disc is really good. It's really good. It's one.
I love that. Let's say I love the soundtrack. We didn't even mention it. Yeah, I love the soundtrack.
Brian May.
That was one of those things as we're watching it. Scott goes, "Is Brian May Australian?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't think so, but I guess he is."
Yeah, no, different Brian May.
Different Brian May. Not the Queen Brian May.
Oh shit.
Yeah, no.
I thought it was
actually a composer.
I thought it was Brian May from Queen.
See, when Queen...
I'll be honest with you guys, when Dabney Coleman passed away a few days recently, I watched Cloak and Dagger because that's one of my favorite films with him in it. And and I had just watched Road Warrior because I knew I was going to speak with you guys. And when I saw the Road Warrior, I saw it say Brian May. I assumed it was the guitarist. Right. And then when he popped up on Cloak and Dagger, I was like, all right, I got to Google this now. And it turns out, no, he's actually an Australian composer who's composed for a number of films throughout the...
Okay.
See, and it makes sense because when Queen composed or does the score for Flash Gordon, it just says Queen.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
So,
see, I just thought that Brian May just had this whole other career in film, kind of like Trent Reznor doing movie scores. See, I had this whole backstory like built up for Brian May from Queen.
See, that's
composing
movies.
That's
what this podcast is doing. It's teaching the children. It's giving out some vital information that even we weren't sure of. So, how about that? But I will say that the mix on the 4K it was so good because it didn't do that thing where we couldn't hear the dialogue, then we turn it louder, and then an action scene would happen and shatter our windows. So everything was at the right level. We're like, I don't have to change the volume at all. It was perfect. Yeah, and the score was really great by the other Brian May. So,
so funny.
At any rate, pick up the 4K on Amazon now, kids.
I mean, Pete, this movie has inspired drag race challenges.
Absolutely.
The post-apocalyptic runway
Yes,
from season
from
4.
Season 4. Yeah, for sure. I feel like every now and then when we in those hot summer days when we go to a beer bust, every now and then I feel like our wardrobe choices are a little Mad Max inspired, but that's another story.
I say we need photos. Yes, we need pictures.
Oh, there's plenty of those. The two of us do have our Scott's harness is neoprene. I have a leg thigh harness situation that is leather, so I'll tell you, I got one up on you there. But,
Yeah, you're fully driving. You're fully piloting the motorcycle when. I mean, we're almost in Mad Max days, but I mean, give it a few more years.
Yeah.
Right.
See, but the thing is, Max's car has big barrels in the back that he can just fill up with gasoline.
Are we led to believe that it's the same car that is in the opening shot of Fury Road?
Yeah.
That car's been to hell and back.
In the prequel comic, that same prequel comic that Pete referred to, they actually, I think, show him or explain that he rebuilt it from other parts.
Okay.
But it's kind of like Kenny in South Park, right? It gets destroyed in every film,
yeah.
and then shows up in the next film.
Yeah.
It's like the Enterprise in Star Trek.
Well, yeah.
How many times can we destroy it?
Well, it's also
Right.
that thing of like when you rebuild a ship piece by piece. Is it the same
Right.
ship? Now it's
Right.
just a completely different thing.
The ship of Theseus. or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, in the 1980s, I saw that, and I remember that car, obviously, in Road Warrior. And then I wanted one. And then, if you remember the band Information Society,
Yes.
they had a video for one of their songs, had another car, and it was on an album cover, I think, another Mad Max inspired car. I wanted to have that one. By the time I got my license, I wanted that to be a goal. It never happened.
Yeah. An interceptor. What the hell is it?
Yeah, well, yeah. They called it that. I think it was really a... Yeah, it's really I wrote it down here somewhere. It was a Falcon.
Oh, okay.
The real car, yeah.
Interesting. All right. But I'm thinking, like, how do these motorcycle dudes do it? At least if you've got like a car or a truck, you get like these big reserve tanks. But like motorcycle, you got like a 1 gallon tank. Granted, the 1 gallon tank will last you a while, but I don't know.
Yeah, you just got to outrun them.
Yeah,
then.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. But yeah, we're getting revved up for a post-apocalyptic war zone. We can make it happen.
I just have to dye my hair again. I've gone through bleach blonde phases. I'll probably have to go back.
And I've gone through mohawk stages, so we can make it work. But well, I think we should probably start wrapping this up. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about your where we can find you, Will, and your show.
Tell us about a little bit about the 80s Now podcast.
Yeah, so 1980s Now is a weekly podcast where we examine the importance of 1980s pop culture and its continued influence. We don't go into deep dives the way you do about movies, but we take a look at news stories that are oftentimes about pop culture related to the 1980s that are contemporary and either tie them to something in the back to the 80s or something from the 80s that's happening now.
So we were just watching The Wedding Singer a few days ago, and I was thinking about the timeline of the making of that movie. That movie came out in 98. It is set in 1985. And when I was thinking of the time that's passed now, the movie would be set in 2011, and how we can never get back to that as a society of jumping. I mean, it's not even that far. Like, how many? That's only like 11 years, I think, that we can never really get back there. Of that, when you think of 11 years from 1998, just how different a lot of culture was. And I think that's kind of a bummer.
Right.
I saw a meme where it was, it was an older meme, but it was like, if Marty went back now, he'd be, in 1995. And I thought, what's that going to look like? Like, how is he going to know he's traveled back in time? From now. And I agree with you, Scott. The idea that for me, the 1980s is that the last, decade that had a very specific, even though it was, it's specific and still amorphous because it's almost everything in something specific. that you could define, and you know you're there.
We were just talking about the evolution of rock music in the 80s, of rock music from 1980 and then flash to 1989, and you get, I mean, who were we discussing? The Pixies, and just how, like, that is so cool, of just the evolution of rock music like that.
Yeah, and I think so many aspects of pop culture and other aspects, and not just pop culture, but if you think about, politics and science, etc., where in the 1980s so much happened.
Yes.
I think in that 10 years, and decades obviously they're contrivances, but in that 10 years that have happened, maybe in any other 10 years since.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll never forget just kind of in the 80s and having a home movie camera, right? We take these home movies and watching them back and just being like, I mean, VCRs and home movie cameras, this is just like, this is great. This is a film studio in our house. And seeing my parents having theirs on film and being like, wow, like film, like that's so like, it's so beautiful, and it looks like aesthetically, like it's just such its own thing. And no one will ever long for that with VHS. This just looks like crisp, clean, perfect video. But now it's like that's its own aesthetic, like this vaporwave, like kind of VHS. Like people put VHS filters on TikTok videos and like things like that. Where to me at the time I was like, no one will ever long for this. No one will wistfully think back about like VHS home movie cameras. But now it's like this aesthetic that people are chasing. I often also
You're right, and it's everything is digital now. You're right. Everything's sort of homogeneous and perfect.
Yeah.
So, what are you going to hearken for now in 20 years?
But we'll see. I mean, that's what everybody thinks at the time. But I also have a bone to pick with I never thought I'd get to that point because as a teenager, I wore 70s clothes, right, in the 90s. And I just dressed like that's just how I dressed. I liked vintage shopping and all of that. And seeing like 70s parties and stuff and be like, oh my God, these people wearing like Afro wigs. Like people were just walking around dressed like crazy, like tie-dyed hippies all the time. And so now, you see like people on Instagram and like they're like 80s appreciation pages. And I'm just like, it wasn't like that. Everyone's house wasn't neon.
Yes.
Everyone's house was wood panel and popcorn ceilings and mirrors with gold veins in them.
Mm-hmm. Everyone had that same orange sort of velvety couch.
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. Right? Yeah.
I will always love appliances having colors like green and yellow, rust, burnt orange. But the 80s were such a specific time, and nowadays we're just can we ever go back to that kind of very specific like blocks of these decades? Now it's just all kind of blending together.
Yeah.
And it's almost part of it, I think, is that 80s in the 90s too, so a little bit, is we didn't have the access we have now to everything. Mm-hmm. So our nostalgia was for longing for things we couldn't find. And so we had a period of time where we were like, oh, I remember that thing. Now, kids today, they can always have the things they have and just keep on having them. And if they don't have them, they can Google and they'll have it. It's, I don't know. It's just different.
Go pick it up.
Or everything is so accessible that they're probably not going to reach out for all this weird shit because they have all of these episodes of like a Netflix series to watch.
Great. Yeah. So I'm sure you are available on all platforms.
Wherever. If you can find this show we're listening to now, you can find our show there too.
Various podcast platforms.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for coming on our show. This was a blast.
Thank you so much, Will.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Like I mentioned, I'm a fan. I always look forward to listening to the new episodes and seeing how you dissect the latest film on your show.
Awesome. Well, we're definitely big fans of yours as well. So we'll come on again in the future. We'll talk about more 80s stuff, man.
Very good.
Alrighty.
Look forward to it.
Alrighty. Well, we'll let you go. Thank you so much, listeners. Stand by. We will be right back. Listeners, thank you for sticking around to the very end of the episode. As usual, another fun one.
Guess what?
What's that?
I'm on the outro.
Scott.
It's been a couple weeks.
Hello.
Sometimes, listeners, sometimes how we record these, I am sometimes either working on the episode or at work when we're finishing these up. So sometimes Pete does them by himself.
Yes, indeed. But you're here today.
I'm here now.
Welcome back.
Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior.
Yes.
I'm glad that we got to this movie.
Absolutely.
I know that somebody like Mel Gibson, we didn't really talk about this in the episode.
Well,
I know that
yeah.
somebody like him is a very loaded figure.
Right.
Of that. There's a lot to unpack with that one.
Yes.
But, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it's 80s Mel.
Pre-problems.
Pre-meltdown.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But fun movie, and we're on a Mad Max kick right now. We just saw Furiosa, as you could tell, and we're probably going to do a rewatch of definitely the first movie, and most likely we'll get to
I feel like
Beyond
I feel like-
Thunderdome.
I feel like we were a little rough on Furiosa in our review.
We were a little rough on Furiosa in our review, but you know what? I think we still kind of all said that we were like, we're glad we saw it.
I liked elements of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe it all didn't work as a whole completely for me,
Right.
but it was still a good movie.
Yeah. I mean, it just shows how well done Fury Road was.
Like I said, the bar was very high.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you so much, Will Padilla. What a great suggestion for us to cover this movie and almost these two movies. And you're welcome back to the show.
Go check out 1980s Now.
Absolutely. Go check out that wonderful podcast. But right now, I think it is just about that time.
For Patreon shout-outs, let's hear them.
Time for some Patreon shout-outs. We'd like to say a great big hello and thank you to all of our wonderful active patrons, including our friends Amy, Erica, Anna, Mitchie, Christina, our friends at the How Do You Drew podcast, Andy, Kate, Pep, Tammy, Roberto, Daisy, Patrick, Kelly, Chrissy, Stephen, Laura, Thomas, Lori, Brenna, Jessa Rabbit, Lawrence, Lisa, Alexis, Thomas, Millie, Ted, Benny, Melanie, Susan, Shelby, Muffy, Paul, Jamie, Drew, Genevieve, Dawn, Josh, Aaron, Nick and Shannon, Christine, and Rufino. You guys, thank you so much for being patrons.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
You'll
indeed.
get a lot of fun stuff on the Patreon.
Yes.
You will get our television that made us gay at the $5 level.
Mm-hmm.
Television that keeps us gay. Made us gay. I think it's keeps us gay.
I think it keeps us game. But, you know.
Which you'll get one of those every month at the $5 level. And at the $10 level, you'll get one of the Watch With Us commentaries. And guess what? We are going to be recording this month's commentary right when we get off doing these sign-offs.
Yes, indeed.
So
As
you will
soon
have
as I'm
one
here.
as this episode comes out.
Absolutely. So, head on over to patreon.com/movies that made us gay for more information on our bonus features. We would also love it if you would rate and review our show. Head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and give us 5 stars.
Give us 5 stars.
And you know what? If you want to write us a review, if you've got something nice to say in your heart, open up your Apple Podcast app. If you have an iPhone, it's pre-installed, people. All you have to do is search for podcasts, then search for movies that made us gay, then write something really nice and smash those 5 stars, and we'll read it on an upcoming episode. You can also follow us on socials. We're at Movies That Made Us Gay on Instagram. That's where we are the most active. Over on IG, and anytime you like a post, share a post, comment, save, any of that stuff really helps us out. All that engagement really helps the show to reach a wider audience. So we love it when you do all that great stuff. Engage with us. So do that over on Instagram. That's where we're the most active. You can follow our personals if you want. I'm Peter Lasagna on Instagram and X.
I am Scott Youngballer on Instagram, and follow my letterbox.
Yes, indeed. Our letterbox is really fun. Any new movies that we're watching, you can keep up with us and check out Scott's funny little one-sentence reviews. So, that's about it. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.